Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Barak. It's an absolute honour to be here tonight to help launch an exciting new lecture series focused on young people. I'd like to introduce the keynote speaker for tonight's event, Amos Washington, the 2018 Australian UN Youth Representative. Amos is a 22-year-old Adelaide Hills local who became involved with UN Youth Australia's activities after attending events as a student. Since then, Amos has facilitated conferences and events with UN Youth Australia across the country, has served as Regional Officer and Education Director of the South Australian Division, as well as in New Zealand as part of the Atoria Leadership Tour. I'm not sure if I pronounced that well. I'll get that later. An educational tour for young people that Amos deputy convened in 2016. Beyond UN Youth, Amos has worked in multiple roles in the non-profit sector. Amos has a passion for the arts and has worked with Urban Myth Theatre of Youth, South Australian Youth Arts and the Centre for Music, Liturgy and the Arts. In 2017, Amos spent time in Canberra working with the National Centre for Indigenous Studies as part of the Aurora internship program. Amos is an arts law student at the University of Adelaide, currently deferred. He completed a Diploma of Languages in Chinese in 2016. Please join me in giving Amos a very warm welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Barak and the Affinity Intercultural Foundation, I'd like to acknowledge the fantastic work that you do in the community and bringing different cultures and people of different religious backgrounds together. I think it's fantastic. I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and speak and eat delicious food today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here who may be here today. Great, so as Catalina said, my name's Amos Washington, and I'm this year's Australian Youth Representative to the United Nations. So I began my term in January of this year, and I'll continue until the end of this year. Before I go into more details about what I do in this role and why I'm here today, I wanted to share just a quick anecdote from my childhood with you all first that I consider my, Batman and Spider-Man all have their origin stories. I am nothing like them whatsoever, but I have got an origin story for how I got into this, into this position. I'll just share that with you quickly. So from a young age, I've always been passionate about ensuring that young people's perspectives are heard. And I know that's true for so many of you here today, and it's great to see so many young people my age here as well. My passion for adequate and sustainable, meaningful youth representation began when I was in Year 7. Outside my primary school basketball court, there was a huge, rank puddle created by a dip in the bitumen pavement. Sometimes if bitumen isn't taken good care of, you get those potholes and they fill up with water really easily. And this one was like deep, muddy, sludgy, and it seemed to be slowly but surely expanding its territory every time we checked. The puddle seemed to be perennial. It didn't matter if we were gripped by an awful South Australian heat wave or a damp Adelaide Hills summer, winter, damp Adelaide Hills winter, although our summers can be a bit damp sometimes too. It was always there. Walking from the Year 6 and 7 classroom block, it was nearly impossible to circumvent without dipping like the hems of your pants in the mud. And nothing was being done about that. And that was frustrating me. So 12-year-old me got really fired up about this. And the absence of a primary school SRC at the school that I went to meant that there was no formal avenue of complaint to the school. And to me, this was not good enough. So after much campaigning in class and getting my fellow students on board and during meetings with my teacher, the school set up a very small SRC of 2 members, 1 boy, 1 girl, from grades 5, 6 and 7 to have an afternoon tea a few times a semester with the head of the primary school to discuss school issues. I don't recall the puddle actually ever getting fixed. I couldn't tell you if they kept the small SRC after I left at the end of that year either. But I suppose that experience sort of began a bit of a journey for me that gradually led me to working in this incredible job that I have. And I don't take this job for granted. What I do in my job, I think, is very special. I was involved with the Youth Representative Program as a high school student when I was in Year 12. I remember hearing from the Youth Representative at a UN Youth event, the organisation that administers the Youth Rep program, and being amazed at the idea that young people had a voice and that we did have something important to share and contribute to society. So that's what my job is all about. So my role is administered by UN Youth Australia with the support of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And my job involves travelling around the country on a 6-month listening tour. I'm in week 4 of my 6-month listening tour, and I'm talking to young people from all across the country, from all walks of life, conducting consultations and collecting information on issues that they care about. Now, every youth rep each year has a different leading question, a different question they hope to have answered at the end of the year. And this year, my question is, what would Australia look like if young people had a greater say? So I'm encouraging young people to participate in my consultations, fill out a survey that we have. We have a Humans of New York style photo series, and we also have an anonymous art project where we want young people to share their vision of their ideal Australia and tell me the issues that they care about, so that when I go to the UN in New York City for 6 weeks, I'll be working there on behalf of young people, and I will have an informed understanding of what young people in 2018 in Australia care about. I'll then deliver a speech at the UN General Assembly, and one of the most exciting parts of my role, and I was certainly excited about it when I was in high school, was that what I deliver in my speech is directly informed by what I hear during the consultations. So I don't know what I'll be talking about in my speech just yet, because I've only heard a month's worth of young people. But I can't wait to continue on this journey. So this evening's topic, and I'm very privileged, I feel very honoured to be the first person in this youth series, and I think it's fantastic that you've set that up this year. But today's topic is on youth engagement and leadership. And as someone who's in the position of being able to hear from young leaders and showcase the incredible work that young people are doing in their communities, I wanted to share 5 things about young people that I believe to be true, that I hope will highlight the importance of having a role like mine, but also, and more importantly, the importance of engaging further with young people and ensuring that their perspectives are heard. So the first statement that I believe to be true about young people is that young people are not just emerging as leaders, they are already leading in their community. Whether, like some people I've met this year so far, you create your own startup media organisation for young people, or you write a manifesto on revitalising Australia's foreign aid policy to deliver to Australia's key decision makers, or perhaps you're volunteering your evenings working with your peers who are living in vulnerable conditions in far western Sydney. Young people are not merely developing their leadership skills for the future, they are already doing it. Young people may not have the tangible, obvious, clear powers that our nation's politicians and senior public servants may have, but I see young people serving in leadership roles, using the resources that they do have every single day. The second statement I believe to be true is that youth issues are community issues. I've always been incredibly disdainful of the tradition of telling young people to wait until they experience the real world. And I think everyone in this room might have heard that at least once in their life, perhaps some of us more recently than others. Wait till you get into the real world, and then you'll be complaining then. Just you wait till you get into the real world. I think that's a phrase that we really need to kill off. Young people do live in the real world. Many young people are indeed dependent on a parent or guardian, and most young people, so between the ages of 13 and 25, are still studying or training. But this does not mean that young people are at all immune to the challenges that face the community. As part of my consultative process, I ask young people to write as many issues they can think of that affect young people on a piece of butcher's paper. My consultation is very low tech, with texters and crayons and paper. The responses are incredibly diverse. I've heard young people talk about education, drug and alcohol abuse, discrimination, violence, housing, mental health, jobs, and so many others. And lots of really specific ones that I really like hearing as well. I like hearing the really localised issues that young people care about. I then ask young people to circle the issues on that piece of paper that they also think affect the broader community. And most of the time, the participants circle the entire piece of paper. It almost seems too simple, but I suppose that's the point. Issues that affect youth are issues that also affect the entire community. There are two reasons why this is so that young people identify when I ask them for their reasoning. The first is that youth issues are community issues by virtue of a knock-on effect, such as youth unemployment or drug abuse. A young person's failure to thrive will be felt by the rest of the community and will affect the community in a What's happened? There we go. All good? Cool. Awesome. A young person's failure to thrive will be felt by the rest of the community and will affect the community in a multitude of different ways. The second is that issues affecting young people are so broad and so multifaceted that, naturally, they affect the whole community, such as access to mental health services or housing affordability. So the question that naturally arises at this point is, if youth issues are also community issues, why should we include youth perspectives in policy decision-making? So this brings me to my third statement I believe to be true. Young people's perspectives are unique. I firmly believe that young people have a unique perspective to bring to the policy decision-making table. Young people I've spoken to so far in my job have echoed this sentiment. Here's 16-year-old Ella from New South Wales, who participated in our photo series. This is a portion of a statement that she provided me. In my ideal Australia, people would be celebrated for their differences, and every individual would be given a fair chance to show their passions, to follow their passions rather, regardless of gender, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. In our modern society, difference should be celebrated, but somehow the LGBTQI community and an individual's racial background still holds a stigma. It is simply ludicrous that in Australia, subconscious discrimination still exists, especially in our multicultural country. Discrimination is simply not okay. Even as a joke, it should not be tolerated, even on social media. I believe Australia would be a different place if we had young leaders sharing their perspectives on world issues. Here's also 25-year-old Maria from Victoria. In my ideal Australia, young people will be able to have a say on matters like education, healthcare, employment, welfare, and community participation, which have an impact on their lives and have their opinion taken seriously by those in power. Young people at 16 can learn to drive, apply for youth allowance, work and pay taxes, have a choice between continuing schooling until you're 12 or go to TAFE, but don't have much political agency on how those matters are dealt by them. I'm 25, so my time as a young person is running out, but I don't want to see the next generation of young people overlooked and ignored by people in power because of their age. And then 17-year-old Justin, also from Victoria, summarised these thoughts quite concisely. In my ideal Australia, young people's innovations and perspectives have the power to change the world, the power to shape the world. And I actually wrote one down after I put some notes together for my talk today. I realised I needed to put up a new photo today from the photo series, and as I was uploading it a few hours ago, I just thought, hey, I have to share this one as well. So this is Cassie, who's 16, and she's from South Australia. She's from rural South Australia. She says, I believe the biggest challenge we face is that we can't have a say in what is important to us. Really, if I could influence one thing in my community, I would try to show that young people are an incredible, diverse group of people who deserve attention and the chance to influence change. Let's not forget too, that as young people, we've grown up in an environment of rapid change. Globalization and technological advancements mean that young people are more globally connected than ever before. So it's important that we harness this energy and this potential power to make change and ensure that we provide adequate support for young Australians to contribute. The fourth statement I'd like to share is that young people are constantly underestimated. I've been a volunteer with Youth SA since I was 17 years old, And in UN Youth SA, we're very proud of our strong regional programs. In 2014 and 2016, I had the privilege of, as a volunteer, taking the youth reps in 2014 and 2016 of those years to different regional areas in South Australia as part of the listening tour. One moment that stuck with me for a long time was when the 2016 youth rep and I visited this particularly incredibly remote country town out in the desert. It's the kind of town that has a one-room airport with no security and a high company representative that seems vaguely surprised when you arrive at their desk asking for their services. That kind of town. I'd heard from school teachers in the area prior to our visit about the degree at which these young people were engaged. We were given warnings. We were given warnings that these young people were troubled, hard to engage with, and not necessarily the best use of our time. Our students live in a bubble is a warning I've heard from teachers several times in lots of different areas across the state. I've never thought of that as a reason to not visit and work with the students. In fact, in the Youth Rep program, it's critical that we move away from just speaking with young people on advisory panels and SRCs and talk to young people who perhaps don't have as formal an avenue to share their thoughts. So despite these prior warnings or reservations from the schools and from the community, we visited this town and spoke with young people in a variety of forums. The young people I spoke with were not only incredibly passionate about the issues in their community, but they had ideas. They had ideas that they wanted to see implemented. And these ideas were, naturally, founded in their own experiences of growing up as young people and experiencing issues differently as young people. Listening to a group of young scouts in the town who wanted to create formal safe spaces for LGBT young people in their district schools, we, and perhaps the scout leaders as well, were provided with a reminder that young people care deeply about the community in different ways, and that youth perspectives may differ from the perspectives of the broader community. This year, I hope to speak with as diverse a range of young people as possible. When you give young Australians a platform to speak without any prior expectations or prejudices about their opinions, we may be surprised as a country. Excuse me. The last statement I'd like to share is that young people want more opportunities to be heard. I've had the privilege of talking to thousands of young Australians throughout my time in UN Youth, even before I began my role as Youth Rep. And that's one of the joys of volunteering with UN Youth Australia. We're an organisation made up completely of young people, completely of people under 25, and all of us are volunteers. So our board chair is 23 years old, and she's volunteering her time. So is our national president, and all our volunteers down to our everyday facilitators. I compiled a few moments over the last few years that I remember as times when young people expressed a really keen desire to be heard and help influence and shape decisions, and I'll share some of them with you now. High school students in Adelaide's southern suburbs creating an advocacy campaign for better mental health and wellbeing programs, complete with taglines, television advertisements they made on a green screen, an action plan. It was quite incredible. Young Australians living off the mainland, looking for easier and more affordable ways to connect with the services that are only provided in the city. High school students in Adelaide's disadvantaged outer northern suburbs, which has an incredibly high unemployment rate, sharing their concerns about driving laws and how we can make the roads safer for young drivers while also providing a clear pathway to independence. Regional young people living with drug abuse in their communities who want a safe environment for their peers. Young people in Western Sydney sharing their experiences of harassment on the street, on public transport, and in airports because of their religion. And young Victorians of diverse cultural backgrounds calling for greater representation of people of colour in the media and entertainment industries. These young people were desperate for a role model in television and media, in film, in the local news that looked like them. In my term as Youth Rep, I hope to provide opportunities to connect young people with decision makers and also provide these young people with the confidence and support to feel as though they can make powerful change in their communities. It's important to note as well that a tokenistic approach to greater youth engagement will be pointless. We need youth perspectives to be A, heard, and B, valued and considered. We must truly invest in young people and ensure that perspectives of a diverse range of young people, including young people of colour, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people living with disabilities, young people in the justice system living in juvenile detention, young people of diverse genders and sexualities, rural and remote young people, and young people of different cultural backgrounds. It's crucial that they are all included in this journey to greater youth engagement. That's all for my sort of formal talk I'm giving you today, but I would like to finish with a very short quote from Isaac, who's 19 and lives in Victoria. This quote was collected as part of last year's program, and it has an important message. And that quote is, "Just because a voice isn't always heard doesn't mean it's not there." Thank you.